Welcome back, everybody, to the Indie Music Grounds podcast. I really appreciate you guys, just the growth on this channel, and I love talking about indie music. I have to bring that up, it seems like, all the time, but I really do. And this week has been a person that I've been waiting to talk about for a long time because I think he's just a musical genius, and I think one of the busiest people just in music in general, but he means a lot to the indie world, especially the beginning days of Gorillaz, which did get critical acclaim right away. So, again, this is one of those people where I hesitate a little bit to say that he's an indie artist, but I just think he's never completely broken into the way of the mainstream like a lot of mainstream artists have, and especially when I get into the reason why Gorillaz was even created in the first place, I think it even makes a little bit more sense. But I am not talking about the Gorillaz, or maybe I am, I guess in a sense to say, I'm talking about the mastermind behind all of not only Gorillaz, but of the band Blur and other musical artists as well, Damon Albarn. So if you don't know who he is, his time in music in general even started before the Gorillaz became a group, and that's because he was the frontman and main lyricist of the rock band Blur. So again, I kind of hesitate to say, he wasn't just Gorillaz all the time. He had a musical career beforehand, but this is way back in 1990, Blur released their very first singles, and She's So High was the very first one as well. And again, like I said, that was way back in October of 1990. So Blur, toured. They were a big band long before the Gorillaz even became on the scene. But I want to get into that period of time in between the start of Gorillaz and you could say the ending of the band Blur. But, a lot of people would argue, hey, Blur never even really ended themselves, which is true. So what happened was Damon had met a guy named Jamie Hewlett. And Jamie was not a musician, he was an artist. Now, think to yourselves, what was happening at the beginning of the 2000s? Boy bands, right? You got NSYNC, you got Backstreet Boys, even the start of hip hop, which was just starting to become a thing and break into the mainstream itself, was featuring, solo acts, which is extended into our period of time today. And Damon was tired of it, to be frank. He did not like the direction that music was going, and a little bit of animosity towards Blur, because Blur themselves were even starting to have fighting into the direction of music and where they were going as a band. And he was kind of tired of just being put into a box. He wanted his music to just touch any genre that he wanted. And he liked hip hop. He had nothing against the musical genre of hip hop. He just didn't like where music itself was going. Especially, I think it was more towards boy bands and what they were doing, and kind of the commercialization of music. So what he decided to do was he made the band with this artist, Gorillaz, and they weren't going to promote the musicians in the band. They were going to promote 2D at the time, dimensional pictures and caricatures and artists of the band, which of course we know what they look like today. And they were going to be the stars of the band. Now, everybody remembers their self-titled debut, especially the main songs off of that album, Clint Eastwood, 19 through 2000, Rock the House, that was everywhere. But especially, everybody knows about Demon Days, that came out in 2003, I believe. And, that itself just or 2005, I'm sorry, 2005. Everybody listened to that album. You know, Feel Good Incorporated, Dare, Dirty Harry, Kids with Guns. It was a massive album. And that, I believe, did break them into the mainstream, whether Damon liked it or not. Really did. Now, what's interesting is, like I said before, we're going to kind of rewind a little bit. Blur was still going on at the same time. In fact, when Demon Days came out, Think Tank, which was an album that Blur released, was released in 2003. And Blur did not break up for the first time until 2009, where I wouldn't even say break up. They went on hiatus. So, some people kind of have that misconception that he left Blur for Gorillaz. I do believe he went to the Gorillaz for a time, especially after the success of Demon Days. But I think that's just because he was enjoying it, to be frank. You know, he loved the direction of Gorillaz, and he didn't really know what was going to happen with it yet at that period of time. So both bands were happening at the exact same time, so he was having his two-dimensional creatures do everything from appearing in music videos, singing along to the songs. So frankly, during concerts, he was just showing them on the screen rather than showing himself on the screen. He was having them conduct interviews, for crying out loud. So, it was just absolutely insane. Now, the direction of Gorillaz, and this is kind of just personal input, and Damon as an artist, I think drastically changed to not even their fourth album, but it was more so their next album, Plastic Beach, which was technically, I guess, their third studio album. You did have The Fall, which was their, but I do believe that Plastic Beach is their third studio album. And the style that Plastic Beach went just exploded, I believe, the direction of where Gorillaz would go. Because I still believe he was a little hesitant, even during Demon Days, about what he wanted to do with them. He was playing it a little safe. But I think Plastic Beach was kind of the time when he finally had enough, and they just exploded. And you could see, due to the artists that signed on, how he went all out. He had Snoop Dogg on there, De La Soul, Bobby Womack, which is unbelievable to have him on the album. Lou Reed. There were so many people on that album. And personally, I don't think it was as big as Demon Days was. Critics loved it, though. But I think it was a better album. Hey, tell me in the comments if you believe what was the best Gorillaz album. But I think that personally was the best one, even to this date. Was their best one. Their next album was Humans. It was in 2017, which featured even more people. In 2020, they had a Song Machine project. And then in 2023, they released the album Cracker Island, which to me was kind of a return to form to Plastic Beach. Where they kind of went back to that heavy synth with some R&B kind of mixed into it as well. And Damon has remained busy. He still had Blur up until 2009. And he had other projects as well, such as he had super groups like Bad and the Queen was on there. He has released film soundtracks. He has released scores to things. And he has had solo albums as well. Even up until recently, he has had solo material come out. Now, after all of this, he has been named as, one of the most powerful people in British culture. He has gotten recognized so much in his music career. Blur continues to tour as well. So they are, in fact, they just released a 9th album, The Ballad of Darren, in 2023. So, up until last year, they were releasing things. So he has been extremely busy. He's even had some acting appearances, which I think is kind of funny. And yeah, honestly, I think just like my Danger Mouse video, there's just not a lot about his personal life because he has just remained so busy in the music scene itself and in the art of music itself. He hasn't had the time to really get involved in drama or anything like that. But all things being said, please listen to Blur's music. I'm going to be honest, I haven't been a huge Blur fan. Their hits are great, but if you're going to go with Gorillaz, yes, you can never go wrong with Demon Days, but I highly recommend Plastic Beach, listening to that album, and I also highly recommend listening to Cracker Island as well. But please comment down below, what are your favorite Gorillaz albums and songs, and what other songs of his would you recommend? This has been Sarah on This Week on the Music of the Indie Grounds podcast, and I will talk to you all later.